So a few days ago, I made a video on the Edmonton Oilers asking the question if they could get back to the Stanley Cup Finals. We're going to talk about the other team that was in the Stanley Cup Finals this past year, that being the Florida Panthers, and can they win back-to-back Stanley Cup championships? Now, in recent memory, the few teams that have been able to do it are the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Apart from that, it's been a little rare, to be honest. I do believe that, obviously 2020 and 21 were to Tampa. That's the most recent. Florida's looking to get back to that after three separate different Stanley Cup champions. So we'll see if they can. First off, obviously they won the Stanley Cup in 2024. They kept it close. It kept it fun, but they ended up winning it in Game 7. This team made a lot of changes, for sure. And you always see this after every single playoff team's offseason, or actually not playoff teams, Stanley Cup winners offseason. They usually make a lot of big changes, not because they want to, but because they just don't have the salary cap to sign some of the guys that kept them on during that run. More specifically, they lost Ryan Lomberg, Steve Lorentz, Kyle Okposo, Vladimir Tarasenko, Oliver Ekman-Larsson, Brandon Montour, and Anthony Stolarz, amongst a few others. So this team it's definitely not an argument. They are significantly weaker than they were in the playoffs when they won the Stanley Cup. But again, this usually happens. Players will obviously just, go off and try and get their money's worth now that they have a Stanley Cup. So obviously that is, it's how it works. It's been going like that for years. But I feel like Florida did make some pretty solid moves, so we'll get into that here. Starting off with the re-signings, they re-signed Sam Reinhart to an 8-year, $8.625 million deal. I think it's a perfect contract. I thought they were going to lock up Sam Reinhart to an 8x9. That was what I was thinking, because I thought Reinhart was going to want $9 million. But I guess because, and I'll say this, I guess because the fact that they obviously, they just won the Stanley Cup. I think Reinhart said, yeah, I'll take a little bit of a pay cut, but I still want some money. So it's only like $375K less. But regardless, it's still, significant. It keeps some people around for sure. They also signed Anton Lundell to a 6-year, $5 million deal. Lundell, one of the more underrated players from this past year's Stanley Cup playoffs. One of the more underrated players overall, to be honest. I remember when he was drafted in 2020, I remember streaming that draft. I said he was very underrated. I thought that there were points in his career where I was a little hesitant on exactly if he was going to pan out, but I definitely think he has now. They also re-signed Dmitry Kulikov to a 4-year, $4.6 million deal. I think that's great. It was a great defenseman in this past year's playoffs. I think he's a guy who's definitely bounced around the league a lot. He was on, I think, 3 or 4 different teams before he came to Florida within the last 2 seasons. So it's good to see Kulikov getting his money's worth, getting a long-term contract, and I think he probably will spend the rest of his career with the Florida Panthers, which is honestly great. I'm a big fan of Kulikov. They actually made a lot of free agency signings. Now, not anything that's really huge necessarily, but they did make a good amount. So they signed Adam Boqvist to a 1-year, $775K deal. Adam Boqvist, I believe he will, fit in well. He'll be a depth defenseman. Maybe we'll probably play third pairing. We'll see how they decide that. They also signed Jason Megna to a 1-year, $775K deal. Nate Schmidt to a 1-year, $800K deal. Mackenzie Entwistle to a 1-year, $775K deal. AJ Greer to a 2-year, $850K deal. His brother, Jesper Boqvist, to a 1-year, $775K deal. So it's good to see that both the Boqvist brothers will be on the team. I guess it's some kind of cool brother duo thing they're doing this year. Rasmus Asplund to a 1-year, $775K deal. And Thomas Nosek to a 1-year, $775K deal. So, moral of the story, they signed a lot of guys for their bottom 6 and just some offensive and defensive depth. That's really all they're trying to go for here. And can you really blame them? I mean, they spent a lot of their money that they had as it was signing Reinhart, Lundell, and Kulikov. And obviously, what you can really only do after that is make some minor signings. So, really, a lot of these guys are going to be like fourth-line guys, maybe third-line players at points in the season. But honestly, their impacts won't be that big necessarily, especially when you look at the starting lineup for the Panthers. But I definitely do think that even though the roster got worse, I'm not ruling out the possibility that they win another Stanley Cup. I think they can definitely go back-to-back. Now, making 3 straight finals, when you look at it in that perspective, is incredibly rare. The last team to do it was the Tampa Bay Lightning from 2020 to 2021. 2022, sorry. So, obviously, it's a pretty rare occurrence, but it wouldn't surprise me if it does happen at this point in the season, or at this point in the NHL. So let's look at their starting lineup here, projected by Daily Faceoff, not by me. You start off with their top 6. You got Carter Verhaeghe, Alexander Barkov, and Sam Reinhart. Then you have Matthew Tkachuk, Sam Bennett, and Evan Rodriguez. I think that is a good top 6. Great first line for Hagee. Barkov, Reinhart was great in the playoffs. Matthew Tkachuk actually didn't look like the Tkachuk that we've seen in previous seasons, especially from the season before, but was still very good. Sam Bennett would fit in as an interesting second-line center. It's going to be interesting to see that. And then Evan Rodriguez getting top 6 minutes. I give him a lot of credit. I think that he had a really good playoffs. He's a very underrated player of that esque, and I think that it's going to be exciting to see him with the team yet again. So the top 6, I guess, pretty much stays the same. The bottom 6 is what really changes. You got Eetu Luostarinen, Anton Lundell, and Mackie Samoskevich. You got Jesper Boqvist, Thomas Nosek, and Mackenzie Entwistle. So, again, third line, Luostarinen and Lundell were 2 guys that looked really good in the playoffs. Lundell I liked a lot. Samoskevich, if I think I'm saying his name right, he was, and when we get to the prospect pool overviews for the Panthers, I will go more in depth with him, but he has been their best prospect for a long time. So I would argue that, he could have a really solid rookie season playing with the team. He obviously is coming over from Michigan. I think with the way this bottom 6 is right now, I think he could 100% get a spot in the lineup. And I think that for some of the Michigan fans out there, you could be excited to see Samoskevich pan up into the NHL. I'm probably saying his name wrong, so I do apologize if I am. But regardless, again, the fourth line's a lot of new players. It's going to take a little bit to get adjusted, and obviously, it doesn't, I'm not ruling out someone makes the team out of camp that maybe you didn't expect was going to. So, obviously, with Florida, that's something they got to figure out for sure. Their defense, however, is definitely weaker. You can't argue that whatsoever. They have Gustav Forsling and Aaron Ekblad as your first pairing. That's fine. You have Dmitry Kulikov and Nico Mikkola as your second pairing. And then you got Ulvis Bolinskis and Nate Schmidt as your third pairing. So, obviously, again, as I said, I would expect for Adam Boqvist to get some time up there. But, honestly, that defense is definitely worse. Like, losing OEL and losing Montour definitely makes that blue line not as great as it once was. But I do think that the top 4 is solid enough. I like Forsling, one of the more underrated defensemen in the league. Ekblad, still a solid defender. Kulikov, again, as I said, great defensively. Mikkola obviously was good in the playoffs too. It's just a matter of Bolinskis and Schmidt playing on that full-time third pairing. And again, this is warning. Nobody makes the team out of camp that doesn't expect it to be. There could be someone that shocks out of nowhere. But regardless, that blue line is definitely looking a lot weaker for the Florida Panthers, and you really can't deny it, to be honest. Now, their goaltending is the same. It's Bobrovsky and Spencer Knight. Hopefully he can spend a full year in the NHL and not be in the player assistance program from points to points. I do believe Chris Driedger is their third string, so they brought Driedger back from what I've seen. So I guess that's nice. But regardless, your tandem is probably going to be Bobrovsky and Spencer Knight. Warranted that Knight comes over and plays. So regardless, I think this team can definitely win another Stanley Cup. It's going to be a lot harder, though. I think that this team, you have to say they got worse. They definitely got worse, losing the guys they lost. And again, as I said at the beginning of the video, that's expected because usually teams that win a Stanley Cup, they get worse afterwards because a lot of their guys will leave because they're trade deadline players or one-year deal guys. And, they'll go sign somewhere else for big money. Like Montour did the same thing. Lomberg got good money in Calgary. Tarasenko got good money in Detroit. So obviously, again, that's something that happens a lot. It's not an uncommon thing. So regardless, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you guys think that the Florida Panthers can win the 2025 Stanley Cup, I'm definitely looking forward to it. I was very happy to see the Panthers win it. I do hope, though, that somebody else comes in and wins it because I don't particularly like seeing the same team winning them back-to-back years. That's just how my opinion is. And I already have a Panthers banner up. I don't want to put another one up for the second straight year. So regardless, let me know your thoughts down below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Adios.